welcome to the Heartful Parent Podcast. I'm your host, Christy Keating. In this podcast, we talk about it all, our parenting, our partnering, and our professional lives, because they are all a part of us, and we were never meant to do this alone. Welcome back, everyone, to the Heartful Parent Podcast. Thrilled to have you back with me for another week. And I've got something kind of unique on tap for today. I'm really excited to introduce you to Rosalyn Acosta. Rosalyn is a proud mother of 3 young kids, a wife, a daughter, a sister, and a friend. Like many of us, she wears many hats. She is also the founder of Live, Heal, Travel, and her mission is to illuminate lives that inspire positive change. That is a mission that I can get behind. She does this professionally by offering Reiki and other energy healing for youth, for adults, and for corporate groups, and also by creating eco-wellness retreats. Rosalyn is a certified Reiki master, having obtained levels 1, 2, and 3 certifications. She also is a regular meditator, is certified in the It's Yoga Kids Warrior One Foundation's format, and has training with Niroga Institute's dynamic mindfulness training. She is a learner. She's learning shamanic energy medicine, Jack Kornfield's mindfulness meditation, and so many other things to add to her practice and to add to the way that she illuminates lives that inspire positive change. Rosalyn and I today dive into something that for many of you, and frankly for me as well, may feel very foreign. It may not be something that you have heard a lot about or that you feel super comfortable with or knowledgeable about. You might even feel skeptical. And that is the practice of Reiki, which is, as Rosalyn will describe, using the energy in the body to heal. And by that, in many ways, as you'll hear Rosalyn talk about, she means as ways to manage cortisol, which is our stress hormone, and to reduce stress. As you can imagine, any practice that reduces our stress hormones like cortisol is helpful to us as parents and also helpful to our children. Rosalyn talks about the importance of getting out of that sort of constant state of fight or flight and really activating the parasympathetic nervous system, which is all so super consistent with the things that I talk about in parenting and parent coaching. And it's just approaching this from a slightly different angle. Rosalyn talks about the fact that, so much of what goes on in the world and what is happening all around us really is unseen. And that when we figure out how to tap into some of that, there are avenues for stress reduction and healing that many of us may not be aware of. So, if you're sitting there listening and you're saying energy healing, Reiki, what? Or I'm skeptical, I don't know what the hell this is. Take a deep breath. Join us on a journey here today to explore something new and different that just might be super helpful to you, super helpful to your kids, and might give you a new avenue to shake things up a little bit. Without further ado, Rosalyn Acosta. Rosalyn, welcome to the Heartful Parent Podcast. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here as well. Thank you very much.
So, obviously I shared a little bit with our listeners about what we're going to be talking about today, but this is a subject that not a lot of people know about. In fact, when you and I first talked, I needed an explanation of what Reiki is, what energy healing is, et cetera, et cetera. So let's start at the beginning for those folks listening who are like, I don't even know what this is about. Talk to us a little bit about the energy in the body and the work that you do from just a general standpoint.
Sure. So I always start just in layman's terms, even when I talk to my kids about it, that as an energy healer, we work in the invisible world. And then, of course, they're like, the invisible world? What are you talking about? And then I explain a little more that when you think of your biological eyes, we can actually see about 1% of the world, and 99% of the world is what you could say is the invisible domain. And then if you look at it even more, some scientists say that actually 1% is really generous. To be more precise, the human eye can detect like 0.0035% of the electromagnetic spectrum, which I believe. So in other words, there's just a small fraction that the human eyes can see, which is visible light and everything that we bring in, right, through our eyes. So then when you start to delve into it a little more and thinking about our bodies, right? So our existence, we can think of it in terms of our particle state, our body, and then our field state, which is our energy field. And if you recognize that everything is energy, even our physical bodies condensed into mass, we explore that concept of the subtle body. So our energetic body, working with the chakras, the meridians, and acupuncture, everything in that regard. So just kind of a really simplified version of it.
Okay.
And then if you delve down a little further, many people are familiar with acupuncture, even if they've never done it, it's more widely known here in the West. And so acupuncture, they work with the meridian system, which is kind of like the energetic highways in your body. Reiki, on the other hand, we work with the chakra system. And so chakra is a Hindu word, and it means a wheel. So it's like a wheel of light, right? I've found that people aren't aware that chakras are actually physiological elements of the body that are located at 7 points in the body. So there's 7 chakras in our physical body, and they are created when you have a hormonal gland coinciding with a nerve plexus. So you have these 2 elements. So you have the chemical signals, the hormones, so they're slow and analog, and then you have the electrical nervous system, which is really fast, right? So working with balancing these chakra systems is balancing these 2 systems, the hormonal system and the nerve plexus system. So it's actually really quite interesting. And so Reiki is a technique that you use non-invasive, gentle hands-on touch when you're in person. You can do it remotely. It activates the natural healing processes and clears your body of physical and emotional blockages. And it helps just cleanse and clear the chakras. So that's in a nutshell what it does.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's so helpful, first of all. There's a couple of things I feel compelled to comment on because, first of all, I did not know, I never had it explained that way, that our eyes see so little. I mean, we know that there are, other like frequencies and waves, sound waves, and, all of those things, radio waves, et cetera, that are floating around our world. And I just never really thought of it from the standpoint that those are invisible energies that we don't see. Although when I say it, it's so obvious. And I'm guessing that's kind of a new way of thinking of things for many people that are listening as well. I've heard of the chakras. I've seen, pictures of the body with the different colors in the chakra locations. I did not know that those were tied to an actual physiological spot where these 2 systems of the body are intersecting. I think I thought it was more spiritual, I guess, than a physical place. So that is new information for me. I don't know if it is for those listening. My guess is that it is for many.
Yeah. And so cleansing the chakras, when you work on the physiological level, it's like the organs in a body you can think of, because each chakra performs a different function. So they're associated with a different color, body aspect, psychological aspect, a gland in the body, negative expression. So you have all the different ones. Like the first one is the root chakra. And so that's like the more psychological aspects is that sense of home, of grounding. So clients that I see that when they have a deficient root chakra, then they're experiencing a sense of just displacement, or they're not able to live their full potential, because how can you if you don't feel grounded and secure, right? So there's a lot to it, but that's kind of a brief overview of how they actually integrate with different parts of your body and your emotions and all sorts of things.
Yeah. I mean, I find it fascinating to think about it from the standpoint that, we do have all these systems in our body. And of course, like if we get a stomach ache, we assume that there's something going on with our stomach, right? Like, or our digestive system or something related to that. it's fascinating to me to sort of broaden that and say, when other things are not feeling quote unquote right, and I'm using air quotes, but that there are other systems in our bodies that may be at play with that. And I mean, that's, again, it's one of those things that as I say it, I'm like, oh, it seems fairly obvious, but it is maybe not sort of the traditional Western way of looking at the body. And so I find this sort of Eastern approach and the wisdom involved in this interesting and potentially really expansive. I don't know if that's the right word, but it
I
can
think that's a great
expand,
word.
expand the way that we think about our bodies and the way that we are interacting with ourselves and the world around us. So, you've talked a little bit about what Reiki is specifically, that you're dealing with the chakras as opposed to acupuncture, which is dealing with the meridians. So when somebody comes for a Reiki session, and we'll talk about this, from a parenting standpoint and kids standpoint in a minute, but just from a more generalized perspective, when somebody comes for a Reiki session, what does that look like? Like, how does that unfold? What happens in a Reiki session?
Yeah, well, people, when they're seeking Reiki, they're usually coming because something's not working. So maybe Western medicine has failed in some aspect. It hasn't addressed everything, the whole person, perhaps. Maybe they feel stuck. They just kind of feel funky. They don't feel grounded or balanced, or they're an emotional wreck. They're just something off, and they don't know what. And then during our Reiki session, so I will start for a first time person. Also, we'll kind of do a check-in, see where they're at, and then we'll just do a little bit of grounding exercises and breath work to really get them to drop down and kind of de-stress before they get on the table. It's on a massage table when it's in person. And then I just do the Reiki, and then I provide a debrief session as well afterwards so they can share what arose for them, and then I can share them my feedback. And that's the gist. And same with virtual, except you're relaxing, hopefully on your bed or sofa, lying down. And but yeah, that's kind of what happens. And I wanted to bring up one point too, that so we live in a hyper stressed out world, right, in the West. So a lot of it too that people come is just stress related, right? And so it's very hard for people to reset their fight or flight system. Actually, every creature possesses a reset button for their fight or flight system. So if you've ever seen like those videos or been able to go to Africa or see an animal that just escaped a predator, right? And then all of a sudden there's a quiver. You'll see a quiver happen from their nose to the tail, and they'll quiver and they're resetting their fight or flight system. And then they go back to grazing as if nothing ever happened, right? But we lose that ability after about the 6th to 8th week of life. So we cannot reset our fight or flight system. And we need help doing that. We also have to find tools to do that. And so the reason that people are talking more and more about this, the fight or flight system, which is called the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or HPA axis. It produces adrenaline and cortisol. And these steroid hormones, they're very toxic and deadly to your brain neurons. So when you're in this chronic activation, your muscles, including your organ muscles, are tense, can't sleep well. You're just in this heightened state, right? And then also the cortisol damages the brain's trauma memory processing that further reinforces this stress hormone production process. So it's just a big mess, right? So Reiki and other energy healing and other techniques help to improve the function of your parasympathetic nervous system, which brings your body in homeostasis and gets you to relax and get out of fight or flight. So I just wanted to bring that up because that's also what we see as energy healers, Reiki practitioners a lot, is just people they just can't get out of fight or flight, and it's causing a lot of problems for them.
Yeah. I mean, I know that from work with parents, there are a lot of parents who are constantly in a state of fight or flight for any number of reasons, related to their history, related to the current stress. I mean, parenting in and of itself can be very difficult and put us in that fight or flight place. And, I think a lot of our kids are in that spot of fight or flight. And that's another new piece of information for me. I'm familiar with the parasympathetic nervous system and the vagus nerve and those things that kind of help us calm. Had not realized or did not know that we lose the ability to push the reset button after the, 6th or 8th week of life.
I'm really mad about that.
You
Like,
what?
darn it, we needed that. Why did that happen?
I know. I'm like, that would be such a handy button for us all to be able to push, right? Or do a little like shiver the way that you described it.
Like just another life lesson for us to overcome. God.
Yeah, I know. But we can figure out how to reset those. Like we can learn skills to do that, right? Which I think is part of the work of parenting ourselves and parenting our children. But before we kind of dive into that idea of how do we start to learn those skills, I have to ask, because I'm guessing people are wondering, like when we first talked about this work and you were describing, it's kind of somebody lying on a massage table and you're, hands on helping with the energy at those chakra points. We can't be hands-on when we're virtual. So how in the world does that work happen over, like you and I are on a Zoom meeting right now? How does that type of energy work take place if you're not in the same location as each other?
Yeah. And when I started doing it too, I come to things because I also have like more of a science background as well. So I can be kind of skeptical. I want to delve into things carefully, right? I guess the easiest way to describe it, which it is very abstract too for the layman's term, is how does the cell phone work, right? Doesn't it seem quite miraculous that you can, when you think about it, you can pick it up and you can hear a voice that's been transmitted through this device. So I just think of it in that way. And when you're thinking about how it can work from a far distance, I just look at it as, and what we're taught is just the energy that it can travel through a distance, same way as radio waves can. So it's a bit of a mind bender, and people are like, but just think too, when you walk into a room and there's someone that has the worst energy and they're so negative, kind of just horrible, right? People readily pick up on that. So they're emitting this energy, this frequency, right? Same with if you have ever been around someone who you just want to stay in their presence because they just make you feel so good. They're emitting a different frequency. So it definitely does carry. And people kind of forget about their ability to pick up on this stuff, right? Everybody can do it. It's just really tapping into it and really cultivating it, but it's possible. So.
Okay. So I mean, I like that you recognize that it's a little bit of a mind bender to sort of, because this is a different way of thinking about the body, but you're totally right that we all give off energy that, it's funny because as you gave those examples of walking into a room and there's either a negative person or somebody that you just want to spend more time with, in my head, I'm thinking, oh, I know who that person is, right? Like, I know I could probably name a few for each of those scenarios of people that I've walked in the room and I've been like, whoa, they're giving off something I don't want a part of. Right. Yeah. Or, wow, that person is sort of drawing me in a different way. Like that makes total sense. And my guess is that listeners can relate to that experience as well.
Yeah, and I think it takes the ambiguity out of it, and it just makes it more relatable that anybody is capable of tapping in to this invisible side, because you do it all the time, you just don't know it, right? In those instances. So it makes it a little more relatable.
Yeah, it really does. So you mentioned that even if folks haven't had acupuncture, and I actually have had acupuncture, but for, people who haven't, they still have heard of it. I feel like Reiki is one of those things people have started to hear about more, but you're helping us understand better what it is. As some of these Eastern practices acupuncture, acupressure, Reiki kind of come into more people's awareness. How do you see that evolving with more Western styles of medicine? And, where do we go from here? What's the future of how all of this works together?
Yeah, one of my energy healing teachers, he stated that like the future of medicine is healing, like energy healing, because when you look at the path of like the medical industry, don't get me, in Western conventional is awesome, but there are the downsides. Like look at penicillin, and when they first started that, it was so effective, but then it started to decrease in effectiveness, and like different drugs you can look at and just different modalities. So I feel like it's nice people use it as a complement to their current systems of whatever they're doing. So a lot of people who have cancer use it in conjunction with their cancer treatment, or you can use it in conjunction with anything. That's the nice thing about Reiki is it doesn't have any bad side effects. It can be used in tandem with others. And there's even one Reiki practitioner on the East Coast, and she actually has been working with doctors for a while, and she focuses on medical Reiki, and she does it during surgeries, and they've had so many good results. So I feel like with Reiki, the reason it's not as maybe widely known and accepted is in the medical community, they haven't verified the efficacy. There haven't been a lot of reports done, even though there are a little bit out there. There's some that have tried, and there's a lot of research, but it needs to increase, right? And
Right.
acupuncture, there's a lot of information
research
out there on that in the medical community. So I feel like that's the big reason, right? So.
Well, what strikes me as you're talking, you talked about the adrenaline and the cortisol hormones that get released. And we know, especially that cortisol hormone, which is the stress hormone, is not a feel-good hormone, right? This isn't the dopamine. This isn't like the good stuff. It's not a feel-good hormone. And we all are probably carrying a lot more of it around in our bodies. So what kind of occurs to me is that if we all found better ways to reduce the cortisol, increase our use of that parasympathetic nervous system, calm our bodies, there may be less of a need for some of the more Western interventions, because without all that cortisol coursing through our bodies, there's less destructive stuff happening, right?
Definitely. If you're stressed out and then, your scalp, you're feeling all this tension here, and then you start to get a headache, and then I'll just pop a Tylenol, or conversely, if you're just like proactive, okay, what can I do to decrease how I'm feeling right now? So it's not always just about eliminating stress, because that's always going to be a part of life, but it's how to be more resilient and how to deal with stress in a healthier way. So
gotcha.
It's important to think about.
Yeah, no, it really is. So I want to take this into the world of parenting now, because as we mentioned, I know you're a parent, I'm a parent, but I assume most people listening to this are parents. There are very few things that can be as stressful as parenting, right? Also, very few things that are as joyful, but right. I mean, it brings in both. We can get good dopamine hits. We can also get a lot of cortisol in there when we are parenting, especially in the modern world. And I was sharing with you before we hit record, like I'm in this period right now as we're recording where working full time, no childcare, right? No assistant for the moment. And just sort of this confluence of events that if I would imagine had the cortisol sort of pumping at a bit higher rate in my own body. And so parenting sometimes feels like another, this is so, just it's hard. So how can parents use this to, and maybe there's two different questions here, to help themselves and to help their children?
Yeah. And I think of it in terms of just more like mindfulness methods, mindfulness tools because like you said, children are so wonderful. We love them to bits, but they also know how to like push those buttons and test us to the limit, and really testing us to like, okay, we need to stay steady and show them how we handle stress, be a model for them. So I feel like as a parent, for yourself and for being a model, there are different things that you can do. One being, I feel like a basis is to have some sort of spiritual foundation. And I'm not talking about a dogma or religion, right? I just mean whatever connects you to your own spirit, your higher wisdom, your state of being, away from the ego, right? Just to have that, because that is a good way for grounding, right? And elevating yourself. Then just practicing different other mindfulness practices. Practicing gratitude really elevates you to a higher state of being and shifts you out of whatever bad mood you're in. Breath work, I mean, in yoga, they always talk about it as well. In meditation practice, just using that as a tool, it really does help, which at the end of our session, I definitely want to go back to that. One of my Reiki teachers, she had this phrase where she could say, energy follows focus. So EFF. And that's so true. So we're often so aware that we're doing it. We become stuck in some negative feedback loop. So if you just play a game with yourself and notice how many times throughout the day that you're having negative thoughts. And like, so your focus is going that way. So if you shift your focus onto something more positive, then that'll also lift your vibration, lift you into a better state. And just doing the different things of, like, obviously exercise, yoga is great, journaling, connecting with nature is really essential, I feel, to just feel grounding and to kind of reset yourself and power down. And I know it's so hard, but even if we could all just have one day, no devices for parents and kids, that's huge. And then meditation, I know that sometimes that's a loaded thing for some people. They're like, oh God, there's no way that I can sit still. I can't do that. Well, then that's also maybe an indication that you could really benefit from meditation, and just take it in little baby steps. Do 5 minutes a day, and that has had a lot. Obviously, I'm sure people are aware of all of the medical research that has been done too on the benefits of it as well. So there are lots of tools that I feel like parents can do that are more mindful and just alleviate some of that stress.
You know, as you were sort of listing off some of those things, a couple thoughts occurred to me. When I was going through my graduate training to become a parent coach, one of the things that we talked about a lot, which sounds very similar to what your Reiki teacher taught you, which is what we focus on grows, right? So if we can focus on the positive and the good and make that where we're putting our energy, then we see more of the good. Whereas when we focus on the negatives, we tend to notice more of the negatives, right? But what sort of really resonated for me is that all those practices are such beautiful forms of self-care. And which is something I talk about so frequently. And then it's such a beautiful form of modeling self-care and emotional regulation to our children. And so would all of those things, so meditation, yoga, journaling, gratitude practice, breath work, time in nature, which I also a big fan of, would all of those be part of, like, would they fall under the umbrella of Reiki, or are they just complementary?
Yeah, I feel like it's both. There's complement and some can be considered part of it. And yeah, and then for when you think about also doing it with your kids. So we ebb and flow depending on our schedules, right? But we've often done things here at our house where we have breathing time because we have 3 little kids, and we'll just practice different breathing, and they're trying to meditate, like wiggling around, opening their eyes, but we're just trying to make it fun. Our youngest preschooler obviously loves yoga. It's so much fun. So we did that last night. So just kind of integrating it in any way you can. So shamans call this new generation Homo luminous, not thinking humans, but awakened humans that can heal with their own light. And I do see with the new generation that they are very aware, and just children overall. When I think back to when I was a kid, you're just so connected to your intuitive abilities. And so that's why personally I am also bringing Reiki to kids, because I just see how it can help with cultivate their emotional intelligence and instill this resilience in them as they grow up and get bombarded with all the difficulties of growing up and coping strategies throughout life. But yeah, children possess this inherent unfiltered awareness, and it's just so refreshing as an adult to see, right?
Yeah. I love that phrase, homo luminous. I mean,
Mhm.
that's a really neat way of thinking about our human experience and sort of the next generation of children that we are all, everyone listening to this, are,
Mhm.
raising and contributing to raising. I think there's a lot of potential sort of in what you're talking about, that awareness and their openness to some of
Mhm.
these new ideas is really lovely. And the way you describe it makes it so, I think, more accessible, that we can just practice some of these things with our kids in our own homes. You mentioned, though, and of course I know, this has been a snack introduction, if you will, to what Reiki really is, because there's so much more that we could talk about. But in the interest of time, I would love to spend just a few minutes. I know you have a breathing exercise that you could walk everyone through. And I just want to caution people, like, make sure you are in a place where you can do this safely, right? If you're driving
Okay.
your car, don't get too relaxed right now. But this is something you can come back to if you're not in a place where you can do it right now. So, Rosin, why don't you tell us what you're going to help us all do, and we'll sort of leave listeners on that lovely note.
Okay. So you can think about breathing in terms of even changing the ratio of your breath work, right? So I'll delve into one at the end, but I will just explain it. So if, say, you feel like you need to really dive deeply into a calmer state, then you would want to exhale for longer. So you would think you'd inhale for 4, exhale for 8, or 3 and 6. You want to double the exhalation. So, and then if you want to change the ratio of that, it's opposite. So say you're feeling a little down in the dumps or tired, you need to feel energized. You could inhale for 8, exhale for 4. So a longer inhalation than exhalation. So you can play around with that. And the one that I was going to go through right now is called in the West, we know it as the box breath, the 4-4-4. It's actually also known as the shaman's breath, as they've been doing it for thousands of years as well. So you inhale for 4, and then you hold your breath for 4, exhale for 4, and hold for 4. And I honestly do it sometimes when I'm driving. If you can do that for several rounds, and then you feel like that one is very beneficial because it brings your body in homeostasis again. So if you just go inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. And you can, if you're having a hard time starting, you can, obviously do 4 counts quicker or make them very slow to really expand. But I definitely want to leave that one for people to do because it has so many good benefits, and it'll also help get your fight or flight system calmed down too.
Okay, perfect. Well, and it sounds like it, despite my previous warning, something that
Mhm.
people actually can do while they're driving. Um,
Yeah.
and maybe a good idea. I was reading in an article recently about the increase in just road rage and anger, as we're all out there driving. And so maybe this box breathing or the shaman's breath is a good way, as we are out in the world interacting, to calm things down a little bit.
Yes. And definitely think too, when you're taking a deep breath, that it originates down in your belly, like it pooches, because sometimes people think they're taking a deep breath and they're contracting their muscles in their belly, right? So it's actually, they're not expanding. So think of expanding your belly, then going up, diaphragm, lungs, then your chest. And then when you exhale, chest, lungs, diaphragm, belly. So it's kind of like a wave, and that really helps you to expand and get really full, deep breaths instead of just doing shallow chest breathing.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Which I
yeah.
have to admit, I sometimes find myself doing as I'm sitting at my desk. And I'm like, oh, I'm all up, breathing just in my chest. And I have to think about that idea of breathing down into our bellies. I find this whole thing really calming, like the idea of it just so calming, which I know that's what, Reiki can really serve that purpose. Rosalyn, I know that you are in the San Francisco Bay Area and do hands-on work there. But you also, as we already talked about, you also do this work virtually. So for folks who would like to track you down to learn more about this or explore what this might look like for them or their kids, tell us how folks can reach you. What's the best way for that?
My website is livehealtravel.com. So you can find me on there. And just reach out. I'd love to hear from you and help out in any way I can.
Perfect. Well, and I know that you are offering a special discount for listeners if they want to do a session with you, either, in person or virtually. All of the information about that will be in the show notes, folks. So please go there. You can learn more about Rosalyn's work. I'll just note as a side note, Rosalyn also does travel work in eco wellness travel, and so can support those needs as well. Rosalyn, I'm really grateful to you for being a part of the podcast today. And, you mentioned that you're kind of a skeptic. And I think the first time you and I spoke, I probably was like, I'm a little bit of a skeptic, like just because it's sort of outside of what I knew about or was aware of. And I have found this to be, as I said, really expansive in sort of how I think about our bodies, our health, our energy. So thank you for bringing that to me and to the listeners of the podcast.
You're welcome. And thank you. Thank you very much. It's been fun. I could chat with you all day.
I know. This has been great. Thank you.
Well, have a good day. Thank you so much.
All right, everyone. I hope you got so much out of that conversation with Rosalyn. I hope it opened your eyes and your understanding to some of these new sort of more Eastern style practices that really can be complementary to our Western lives and the way that we are operating in our current world and our culture, our Western culture. I think there's some really interesting avenues for us as parents and professionals to explore in that stress reduction world and in sort of harnessing the energy that is all around us for good and for healing. If you are in need of support from Rosalyn, you can find all of her information in the show notes here. And if you are in need of support on your parenting journey, you can find me at theheartfulparent.com, or you can email me at christy@theheartfulparent.com. You can find information there on my coaching, both parent coaching, fair play coaching, and the Heartful Parent Academy that brings all of that goodness together in one spot. Super affordable, only $27 a month for oodles and oodles of fabulous content that is officially licensed by the Positive Discipline Association, includes content used with the express permission of Eve Brodsky and the Fair Play Association. There is so much good stuff in there waiting for you. I hope to see you there. Reach out if I can support you in any way. Cheers.